When you first start to wean a baby raccoon, it's best to get them onto their staple diet first before introducing any of the fun stuff like eggs or fruit. There isn't a whole lot of foods baby raccoons like more than milk at this stage, so when you first introduce kibble to them, you have to do it slowly, otherwise they won't be interested in eating it. I take the kibble that she'll be eating on a regular basis and finally crush it up so I can add a little bit of it to her milk bottle. She will immediately notice a difference and she's not going to like it, but after a couple of days they will take to it. I slowly add more and more kibble each feeding until there's a strong kibble flavor. You want to get to the point where the bottle is roughly 1/4 of the way full of kibble, then cut out the milk completely. There are two things to note if you're using the same bottle as I am. If you don't crush up the kibble enough, it'll clog the tip of it. I tried to use a blender at first, but I found it didn't grind it up small enough. Crushing it ended up being the best method for me. And secondly, if you add more than 1/4 of kibble to the bottle, it absorbs way too much water and these little bottles can't hold enough water to keep it liquid enough to allow the mixture to flow out. But once they start taking to the bottle well, it's time to move on to the next step. To do this, you'll need to finally crush up the kibble, soak it in water for about 5 minutes, and then put it on some sort of shallow dish or plate. When it's ready, it'll look like a nasty paste. It needs to be a mushy consistency because they are only used to drinking from a bottle, so they're going to try and suckle on it instead. They don't have that instinct to chew quite yet. For the first feeding or two, you might need to assist them with eating. They lose attention with their food pretty quickly, so it's easier to scoop up the food and bring it to them, opposed to scooping them up and bringing it to the food. When you're hand feeding them like this, it's important to let them take a bite, then move your hand out of the way. If you don't, they will immediately start to suckle. We want to break them of this habit. The more they get used to eating, crush up the kibble less and less, so they're forced to chew more and more. Just remember to keep soaking the food so that they don't choke. Once they transition to the kibble, they aren't going to get the water that they need, so you're going to have to teach them how to drink water as well. Like the kibble, they aren't going to like the taste of water. However, I don't bother to sweeten the water, just putting in the milk bottle will be all you need to do. At this early stage of weaning, they still miss the milk, so by giving them the water in the milk bottle, you kind of trick them into drinking it. They obviously won't like it that much, but when they're thirsty, they'll still drink it. They'll just think the quality control is lacking. After a few days, they'll start to take to it. Once they're taken to the bottle consistently, you can transition them to a water dish. Ideally, I should have used a water dish with the water filled all the way to the brim so she could put her head at a more level angle, but she's the size of a dried up crusty raisin. You think I just have tiny little dishes on deck that are unproportionally wide to how tall they are? And I'm sure you're over there thinking, you could just use a plate, but you could be wrong. You obviously have never stepped on a rake before. As soon as this crusty little raisin steps on the edge of that plate, it's going to fling water all over the place. Then she's going to swell up to a full-size grape. And guess what? You're not the one cleaning it up. It's me. I already have enough chores as it is, even if it's self-inflicted just to get a little shock value into my videos. However, this is a pretty typical behavior when they're first learning how to drink. After a few times of trying to breathe water, they learn not to do that. Once they can handle water and crushed kibble, you can start to feed them whole soaked kibble. The kibble doesn't absorb water as fast as it does when it's crushed, so it's best to let it soak for at least 10 minutes. This is where they start learning how to chew. Even though it is mushy, there's still enough structure for them to have to chew it. Their typical gumming won't work, so they have to learn to use their teeth. But anyways, once they get the hang of it, you can switch over to dry kibble. Once you've mastered this, you're all set. You can start feeding them other stuff, like rotisserie chicken.